Hi everyone, I should say good evening everyone. I am actually doing a little case study for you for next week's module. I'm going to walk you through this one. It's a little more complex than the last one, so we're going to take our time and make sure we don't miss anything. Okay? Our case study today is for the movie Kill Me Now, directed by Jeanette B, who is known for movies like Minority Report and Speed and some other great movies, and I've actually worked with them. So here's our case study assumption for this movie. This movie is budgeted at $12 million. We have engaged a sales agent who is charging us a 15% sales agency fee and 1% expenses based on the distribution sales that he will be accomplishing for us and concluding for us. We also hired a collection agent charging 1% of all the amounts that are hitting the collection agency management account. And we have our casting director work for a reduced salary, which is why the profit participation is fairly high with 40%. Our revenue assumptions include the fact that we have pre-sold some rights for our movie and received pre-sales of $4,260,000 through that. And we have unsold rights available at this point for $4,770,000 on the take level, and that's the only level we're going to be focusing on for this case study. The down payment that is provided to us by the distributor who concluded the pre-sales with us and therefore agreed to a payment term that said this pre-sale agreement will require that you do a 10% down payment when you're signing the distribution deal, and you will pay 90% when the movie is being delivered to you. So that means that the distributors are basically making a down payment for the pre-sales, and that money is held by the sales agent until such time that we have put all our other financing sources together to be able to cover our $12 million budget. And at that time, the sales agent will release that down payment to us, and he will charge his sales and distribution fee of 16% from the down payment. Now, after we finish our movie, we will be facing the beautiful situation that we're selling the US rights for $5 million. Now, this happens after the movie is finished, so these $5 million are really not available for us at this very moment when we're putting together our movies. So theoretically, we shouldn't even be knowing about it. But I want to put it in the revenue assumptions because it's going to be applicable later when we go into a revenue schedule. So let's look at our finance plan. The finance elements that we have available for us are the following. We have a bank loan for pre-sales that is going to assume that not 100% of these pre-sale agreements that were done before the movie is finished. That's why they're called pre-sales. Pre-sales are made basically based on the sales agent pitching to the distributors a script, which has to be a commercial script, and the talent, which in this case is Jeanette B, great director with a great track record, and a A-level cast, which is probably going to be based on a list that the distributors agree to, or maybe it's someone that is going to be attached by the time we go to the film markets. Right at this moment, there isn't a name attached. And it is based on the fact that the movie is fairly feasibly budgeted. So these items will enable us to make fairly good pre-sales, and the bank will look at them and say, that's great, but I will still only give you 90% of your pre-sale value. The gap loan, as always, is going to be dependent on how much our unsold rights value is. So the rights that we haven't sold yet. The bank will look at the rights that we haven't sold yet and will only take 50% of that as a value to loan against. In this case, it's 50% of our unsold rights. The bank will charge us some interest up front. It will also charge us a legal fee, and everything is going to be deducted from the loan. The mezzanine lender that we have secured for this will give us 15% of the budget and charge an 8% interest up front. They will require a premium, and that's payable in the recoupment phase, and they will also require a profit participation, each of 5%. we will get a production incentive loan, but in this case, it's not really the case that 100% of our budget is seen as an eligible expense. So this incentive region is more realistic, because in many regions is it the case that it is not going to be your entire budget that will be assumed as an eligible expense by an incentive region. They usually will not, pay on everything. So in this case, the eligible expense that the incentive region will accept reflects 65% of our budget. And on that portion, we will get an incentive of 25%. Now we have a crowdfunder for this movie. 5% of the budget is being given to us by a crowdfunder. And the commission that we're paying for this and on this is 15%, and that's charged up front. Both production incentive and crowdfunding is non-recoupable, so those are amounts we do not have to pay back. The equity investment is going to fund the balance needed after we put all these finance elements together, and if we still need something, it's going to be financed by an equity investor. The equity investor will require a 20% premium payable to him and a profit participation of 10%. So let's see what that looks like in detail. First, we'll start looking at our sales estimates and at our pre-sales. As you see here, the sales estimate sheet again shows all the various territories and the various values of the distribution license fees that they would pay to us if we would sell to them. And again, we have a take column, which is the low column, and we have an ask column, which is the medium and high column. So in the real world, we're probably going to be somewhere in the middle of the two, but for now, for this case study, we will be working with the take column. And as I mentioned before, banks and investors will likely only consider the take column in a finance plan and want to make sure that that column works for them. In the second sheet, we see the pre-sales that we were able to conclude. So we see here that various territories have been pre-sold. And because they have been pre-sold, they're taken out of the list. They're taken out of both lists, out of the ask and out of the take level, because these territories are simply no longer available to be sold, no matter what the column is. So if I would sell something on the take level, I can't sell Australia again because I already sold it with my take pricing. So it doesn't really matter at that point what I could have gotten on the ask level, because Australia is no longer available. So that's how you look at the sales sheet. You see that the pre-sales are made and that the value for those countries, both in the ask and the take level, are removed. So let's go to our funding. In order for us to do something with these distribution agreements, which are literally, as mentioned before, simply a piece of paper, and they don't really help us in that form to fund our movie, so we have to go to the bank and have the bank give us a pre-sale loan based on these distribution agreements. And the bank indicated that it will give us 90% of the value of those distribution agreements, and that is 90% of our pre-sales, which were $4,260,000. So the bank will give us $3,834,000. Now the bank knows that we did receive already a 10% upfront payment, like a down payment from our distributor, and will therefore deduct that payment because we already got it. So the loan amount will therefore be $3,834,000 minus the down payment, which is $426,000. So the gross loan that we have to pay back to the bank when we come to the recoupment phase is $3,408,000. So now it's time to apply our interest. The interest is 5% for the entire term. So it's 5% of $3,408,000, which is $170,400. So the net pre-sale loan that we will have available to us to fund our production cost is $3,237,600. So let's go to our gap loan. The gap loan is a loan that is not based on contracts, does not have assets against it. It's an unsecured loan. And it looks at the rights that we have not sold yet. Remember, the pre-sales we've sold, and they're called pre-sales because we sold them before the movie is being made or is made. And the unsold rights are the rights we still have available to sell at this point. And we have unsold rights available at $4,770,000. But the bank will cut that in half because they don't know if we will be selling, in fact, all these unsold rights. It might be that we just sell some of them and not all of them. and therefore the bank will only allow 50% of that as a value applicable to them for the collateral. So they will take 50% of 4,770,000 under consideration, which is $2,385,000 as a gap loan. Now, this $2,385,000 is under the cap of 20% of our budget, which would be $2.4 million. So we're barely under, which is why the entire 50% of our unsold rights is going to be available for us as a gap loan. The interest charge on this is going to be $166,950 because it's 70% of $2,385,000. We do have to pay a legal fee in this case, that's $25,000. So we're deducting the interest and the legal fee from our gross loan amount, and we'll end up having a net gap loan of $2,193,050. So if we look at both our gross loan amount, the gross pre-sale loan amount, and the gross gap loan amount, our gross loan will be $5,793,000, and that is the loan we will have to pay back because that's the number that pays for the interest and the legal fees. What we have available for us right now to cover our production cost is only $5,430,650 because these fees are being deducted from us, right? And they're paid later in the recoupment phase. So let's look at our production incentives. The region where we are producing will only allow 65% of our budget to be actually eligible expenses. And that's not uncommon. Most regions that offer production incentives will not offer those production incentives on the entire budget. They will only offer them on certain expenses from the budget. So in our case, these expenses reflect eligible expenses of 65% of our budget, which is $7.8 million. So on the $7.8 million, we get 25%, okay? So 25% of $7,800,000 is $1,950,000. So that's all we get because the production incentive only looks at 65% of our budget as being an eligible expense and will only allow 25% of that to be paid to us. We are going to, again, to an incentive lender. We show him our estimate, and the incentive lender will give us a loan so we can actually use this production incentive in advance to cover our production cost. The interest fee of 10% is going to be deducted and paid to the incentive lender, and that's $195,000, leaving us with $1,755,000 to be used for us to cover our production cost. So what else do we have for funding available? We do have a mezzanine loan. The mezzanine loan was 15% of the budget, so that's $1.8 million. The interest fee charged in advance is $144,000 because it's 8% of that. So what we're left with to cover our production cost is $1,656,000. So another thing we got was crowdfunding. Crowdfunding and incentives do not have to be paid back, so that's great. So the crowdfunding entity gave us 5% of the budget, which is $600,000, and charged us a commission of 15% of that, which is $90,000. So that leaves us with $510,000 that we can use to cover our production costs. Now, how do we find out our equity? It's very simple. We combine all the money that we have available right now to cover our production cost. We sum it all up and we see how far we get and how much is still needed to cover our production cost of $12 million, because that's the amount the equity investor is going to have to give us, hopefully, right? So we have a budget of $12 million. We did get that 10% down payment at the time when we signed our pre-sale agreements, and it was held with the sales agent. So now it's time that the sales agent should release it to us. So the $426,000 is going to be the 10% down payment, and it's subject to the sales agency fee, oh sorry, there's a little spelling there, of 16%, and that $68,160 that's going to be deducted from our down payment of $426,000. So that leaves us with a down payment portion of $357,840 that we can use to cover production costs. Now the bank net loan was $5,430,650. The mezzanine net loan was $1,656,000. Our production incentive net was $1,755,000, and our crowdfunding net was $510,000. So if we summarize all these available funding sources that we got together, we end up with $9,709,490,000. So we're still short in covering our $12 million budget, which is why we're asking our equity investor to give us $2,290,510, and that gets us funded. So now we can go ahead and produce our movie, right? So now the movie is produced. So here are our revenues, because after the movie is produced, we can sell all the unsold rights and we get to sell the US. So our pre-sales that we have obviously are part of our revenue, so they're $4,260,000. They're being paid now because now the movie is being delivered. The $4,770,000 is also being made available to us because we now sold these unsold rights. So we are looking at $9,030,000. However, we did already get $426,000 from our pre-sale, so we have to deduct that here because we use that money in the funding. And that gets us to international distribution revenues of $8,604,000. So that's what we have right now available, right, in revenues. We also sold the US rights, which gets us another $5 million. So totally altogether, our worldwide distribution revenues right now are $13,604,000. So that's what we're getting. After we got all these revenues, we now have to pay some expenses, and we have to pay some loans and investments back. So the collected revenues are $13,604,000, and of that, first in line to get paid is our collection agent with 1% of that, $136,040. The sales agent will get 16% of the worldwide revenues, and that's 16% of $13,604,000, which is $2,176,640. At this point, we're paying the gross bank loan back, which is $5,793,000, because right now we're paying for the legal fee and the interest fees. We never gave the bank a check, so we never paid anything. All they did was deducting the interest and fees from us when they gave us a net loan, but no one paid them. So right now they're being paid when this money is coming in. The mezzanine loan, same situation, is paid $1.8 million gross. The mezzanine is asking for a premium on their investment, so that's 5% of $1.8 million, and that's $90,000. Remember, the equity gave us $2,290,510. We're now paying that back, and we're also paying the 20% premium on that amount back, which is $478,102. So if we sum this all up, all these costs and expenses and repayments, we are paying $12,744,292. In order to figure out our net revenues and our profits, we have to deduct these expenses from our revenues. So the $12,744,292 is being deducted from $13,604,000, and what we're left with is $859,708, and that's the amount that we can start doing profit participations with. Now, profit participations are being paid at the same time to everyone. The recoupment schedule that we did earlier, there you see people being paid and entities being paid in a certain order at a certain time. That is not applicable with profit participation. Here, it's 100% profit cake, and everyone gets their slice. That gets them then altogether to 100%. So the mezzanine lender is getting 5% of our 100% profit cake, and that's $42,985.40, because that's 5% of $859,708. The equity investor gets 10% of our cake, which is $85,970.80. The talent and meaning cast and director are getting 40% of our profit, which is $343,833.20, which then leaves for the producer a balance of $386,840 $868.60.